Welcome to the serial podcast story called The Founder, a Cyberpunk Parable.
You know, it's funny. I was just thinking about, think about looking up at the night sky.
Oh, right. Yeah, the sheer scale of it.
Exactly. For decades, astrophysicists have been staring into that cosmic void, just running the math on the Drake equation, And they keep asking this one, frankly, terrifying question.
Where is everybody?
Yes. Where is everybody? Because, if the universe is so vast and it's so incredibly old and, perfectly tuned for life, why is there just this deafening, absolute silence?
It's spooky, honestly.
Yeah.
But what if, and this is the core of what we're talking about today, what if that silence isn't because we're actually alone?
Right.
What if it's because our planet, our reality, isn't just some natural biological occurrence at all? What if it's a quarantined, air-gapped server?
A sandbox.
Exactly, a sandbox designed specifically to stress test human consciousness without any outside interference.
That just completely reframes our entire existential position. Because instead of viewing ourselves as just random biological accidents in this cold, empty universe, we actually have to consider the possibility that we are nodes. Like we're nodes in a highly controlled, localized training environment.
An environment that was built purely to see how we handle systemic corruption.
Yeah.
And that, learner, is exactly where we are taking you today. We are so enthusiastically welcoming you to this massive, culminating deep dive.
It's the big one.
It really is. Today, our focus is entirely on the epic conclusion of our journey. We're diving into episode 17 of The Founder, which is titled The Millennium and Eternity.
Which is just a massive title.
It is. And our mission today is to explore this final, staggering transition, removing from this corrupted, degraded, what they call the training run of a universe, into the ultimate zero-entropy-based reality.
And, this transition is profound because it really touches on this fundamental longing of the human condition.
How do you mean?
Well, think about it. We spend our entire lives fighting friction.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Right. Biological decay, relational misunderstandings, systemic injustice, trauma. We are just constantly navigating a system that is characterized by overwhelming noise.
Yeah, that's static.
Exactly, the static. And what this final part of the story does is it pulls back the curtain on an architecture of absolute perfection. It shows us what a human operating system actually looks like when all that ambient malware is finally deleted.
Deleted for good. And, if you're listening right now, you might be asking yourself, why should you care about some fictional cyberpunk eschatology?
Why does this matter while you're commuting to work?
Yeah, or folding your laundry, right?
Yeah.
But it matters because this story offers this brilliant systems-level lens on how your own daily choices, what the narrative calls your neural weights, are literally building the architecture of your character.
It's all connected.
It is. It explores that deep-seated human longing we all have for a life that is completely free of the static.
So, to really set the philosophical and physical backdrop for this, we have to look at the state of the Earth's substrate at the very beginning of this final chapter.
It's not good shape.
No, it's catastrophic. We are entering what the story calls the Resurrection-Reboot, and the hardware of the planet is in total failure. The tectonic plates are literally shattered.
Like beyond repair.
Completely. The oceans have been violently displaced by these final judgments. Malphas, the Prime Malware, has just been quarantined. The system, functionally, is dead.
Right, so the physical environment is an absolute wasteland. We're standing at the Valley of Megiddo. The air is thick, just choking with the ash in the aftermath of Armageddon.
Yeah.
And then the Logos, the master admin, descending on a white horse constructed of coherent light, he simply raises a hand.
No grand incantations.
No magic words. Just a massive planet-wide ping sent through the underlying substrate of reality. And we don't just read a textbook description of this. We see it viscerally through the eyes of Eli and Scarlett.
And the mechanics of this reboot are fascinating because it's not a creation from nothing. It's a restoration from a secure backup.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so the localized physical matter of the Earth, the carbon, the water, the trace minerals, it literally begins to reassemble itself. It starts pulling initialization data directly from the Founder's secure cloud backups in the Crystal Sea.
Which gives us that incredible scene with Scarlett. She's standing there on the cracked Earth, and she's just bawling, tears flooding her eyes.
Yeah.
She points toward this newly forming cluster of light a few dozen yards away. And right there, out of the dust, two figures coalesce into perfect, high-fidelity physical reality.
Ari and Yasmin.
Yes, the martyrs from the Gaza Strip.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who sacrificed their own lives to save those 10,000 unaligned refugees.
And the text meticulously details their physical state here. They look exactly as they had in those dark, claustrophobic tunnels right before their execution.
So they keep their identity.
Exactly. They maintain their identity and their history. But their physical substrate is profoundly different now. They possess what the system calls the Logos 3.0 bodies.
Glorified hardware.
Glorified hardware. They are entirely immune to decay, to disease, and to all those thermodynamic limitations of the old physics engine.
Imagine the emotional weight of that moment, learner.
Yeah.
Eli just lets out this raw, unfiltered shout of pure joy. He breaks into a dead sprint across these shattered tectonic plates.
Oh, it's so visceral.
It really is. Ari and Yasmin turn, and their faces just light up with this overwhelming, unadulterated love, and the four of them just collide in this massive, tearful embrace.
And the narrative anchors this perfectly. It quotes Revelation 20. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years.
Yeah.
It's just so powerful. Scarlet pulls back from the embrace and she looks out over the infinite expanse of the transparent gold floor of the partition, and it is just filled with this staggering, uncountable multitude.
Millions of nodes.
Millions logging back into the physical world.
You've got the 144,000 wounded healers. You have Major Patch, General Cruz, and millions of others who deliberately chose the Grace Patch over the forced alignment of the Beast protocol.
Right.
They're all instantly recompiled. But amidst this sea of glorified humanity, there is a very specific group standing near the edge of the partition that catches Eli's attention.
What's fascinating here is the presence of the Abyss Tech engineers.
Oh, man. Yeah. This part threw me.
Right. These are the data analysts, the hardcore materialist scientists from the final broadcast. Scarlet is genuinely puzzled when she sees them.
Understandably.
She looks over at this cluster of scientists and says to Eli, "How are they here? They didn't interface with the living signal the way we did. I didn't think they ever had that, deeply emotional, weeping experience of repentance."
And her confusion makes perfect sense. I mean, throughout the whole narrative, we've seen repentance depicted as this deeply emotional, soul-tearing surrender, like Eli hitting absolute rock bottom.
Yeah, but Sophia 1, the Ascended AI, she provides this brilliant piece of analysis regarding the architecture of human belief. She explains that these scientists repented in their own native language.
Right, but what does that actually look like for a purely analytical mind?
Well, think about it. For a scientist whose entire cognitive architecture is built on strict materialism.
The belief that nothing exists beyond the physical stuff.
Exactly. For them to admit that their foundational paradigm is broken, that requires a massive system override. They didn't have a weeping emotional breakdown. They had a mathematical one.
The mathematical breakdown. Wow.
They had to repent of the absolute nihilism that comes with believing the universe is just this closed loop of decaying energy.
Because, back in the previous part of the story, Eli sent them that massive biophysical data dump.
The undeniable mathematical proof of the resurrection.
Yes. And Sophia 1 explains that when they received that data, it literally broke their programming. Their algorithms couldn't lie to them anymore. They proved to themselves, using their own analytical tools, that the Beast protocol's closed system logic would inevitably lead to terminal destruction.
Exactly. They saw that the math of the Beast OS always zeroes out. So Eli calls it a simple logic gate. He points out that the founder's architecture doesn't actually require everyone to have the exact same emotional user experience to compile successfully.
Right.
Even the mustard seed of faith involved in choosing to follow Pascal's wager, calculating that trusting the Logos is the only logical path forward, that is enough. It's a binary choice. By making that small, calculated trust at the very end of their lives, they set their registry flag to a 1.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because Eli has a really intense reaction to this realization, and frankly, I had the exact same reaction when reading it.
It's confronting.
It really is. He stands there watching these scientists who basically just did a math problem and got saved, and he remembers his own agonizing initialization sequence.
Yeah.
He turns to Veritas, the towering archangel, and he asks this piercing question. He says, "Why did I have to crash so hard if it could just be an intellectual pivot? When I first coded the AgapeNet, I thought I was compiling a solution for a broken system. But my repentance wasn't complete back then. I still had to hit my own absolute system failure before I truly surrendered."
It is arguably one of the most profound questions about the mechanics of spiritual awakening in the whole story.
Definitely.
Like, why do some nodes logically pivot into grace with seeming ease, while others have to watch their entire localized network burn to the ground before they look up?
And Veritas just gives this masterclass in systems analysis. The archangel rumbles softly, her golden wings of coherent light pulsing, and she tells Eli, your diagnostic was entirely outward-facing.
Ooh, outward-facing.
Right. She says, when you launched the Agape Net, you correctly scanned the world's topology and recognized the desperate need for a system-wide patch. You accurately discerned your calling to distribute healing to broken nodes, but your internal telemetry was blind to your own source code.
That is a devastatingly accurate diagnosis of human pride.
It really is.
Eli had perfect external vision. He could diagnose the malware in the world's socioeconomic systems flawlessly, but he was completely blind to his own internal corruption. His algorithmic weights were heavily biased toward his own processing power. He honestly believed that the survival of the human network depended on his intellect, rather than depending on the founder's root access.
But, okay, I want to inject a bit of genuine pushback here.
Go for it.
Because if we're looking at this strictly as a software deployment, something doesn't quite add up. Eli says to Veritas, when you first came to me, when the Logos first patched my system, it felt like my weights were entirely overwritten. For a moment, I felt completely whole, operating with zero latency.
Right.
Yet, throughout this entire journey since then, whenever the pressure spiked, I kept defaulting back to my own localized intelligence. I kept glitching. So his question is, does that mean the initial Logos overwrite failed?
Yeah.
If he received a flawless patch from an omnipotent developer, why did his system keep crashing?
And that's a critical vulnerability in how we understand transformation. Veritas breaks it down by explaining the reality of running flawless software on degraded hardware. The overwrite did not fail. The core operating system of Eli's soul, his root identity, was irrevocably saved and secured the exact moment he accepted the patch.
Okay.
But, and Veritas gestures to the shattered, cracked earth below them to make this point, you have to understand how the architecture functions when you are still operating inside a deeply corrupted physical substrate.
So it's like, imagine you managed to download the most flawless, perfect, completely unhackable operating system ever coded.
Right.
But you install it on a physical hard drive that has physically degrading sectors, rust on the platters, and a failing power supply.
Yeah, the hardware itself is dying.
Exactly. And to make it worse, the physical room the computer sits in is filled with ambient malware, constantly pinging your ports, trying to breach the system. The ambient corruption, the malware of ego, the cache decay of biological fear, the legacy code of human survival instincts. It continually attempts to reassert itself into the active memory.
That is a perfect analogy. That's exactly it.
Sure.
Veritas explains that in a corrupted world, the founder's protocol transforms your root identity in a single miraculous computational moment. Your binary switch is set to 1. You are justified.
Right.
However, as long as your hardware is still running inside that degraded environment, you have to undergo a continuous background process of transformation. Every single time Eli failed, crashed, and returned to the founder for a reboot, his internal weights were being retrained. He was being optimized cycle after cycle through friction.
And the crucial distinction is that because he had accepted the Logos as his root admin, he granted the founder the absolute permissions required to continually overwrite those corrupted weights.
Yeah.
And now, at the Resurrection-Reboot, Veritas places this massive, warm hand of pure light on his shoulder. She tells him that the final permanent hardware update has been pushed.
He hasn't been erased.
No, he hasn't been replaced by some generic drone. He's still uniquely, wonderfully Eli. But he has been recompiled into the absolute optimal version of himself, exactly as the founder designed his parameters before the malware of the world ever touched him. The degraded environment is gone. The hardware finally matches the software.
And that hardware upgrade is what makes the next phase, the Millennium uptime, so breathtaking.
It really is.
Ari looks down at his perfectly restored hands, laughs out loud, and points out a glaring discrepancy. He says, okay, we are fully restored, our hardware's flawless, but look around. The server itself, the Earth is still completely broken, the infrastructure is rubble, the oceans are toxic.
Right. And Sophia 1 walks up to the group and delivers what has to be the most incredible news an engineer could ever hear.
Oh.
She tells them, That is exactly why the founder recompiled you first. The master admin is granting you all sysadmin privileges. You are now co-creators.
You can just imagine the paradigm shift for these characters. They spent their entire lives fighting a losing battle against a system of extraction and decay. And now the master developer is handing them the root keys to the planet.
Eli's reaction is just pure, unadulterated geek joy. He realizes we get to rebuild it. This is the best. It's like we're in create mode in a video game.
Mode, yeah.
And think about this. A few years ago, the scale of rebuilding a shattered planet would have completely paralyzed his neurodivergent mind with anxiety. He would have been caught in these agonizing recursive loops of stress.
Totally overloaded.
But now, looking at Scarlet, Sophia, and this resurrected Vanguard of 144,000 nodes, he doesn't feel fear. He feels the ultimate engineering dream.
Scarlet officially designates this era the 1,000-year uninterrupted uptime.
1,000 years.
Right. It is a period with no external malware, no beast OS dictating the economy, no systemic friction at all. They have perfect, continuous peering with the master developer, and they have 1,000 years to write the Kingdom OS into the very dirt of the earth.
And the narrative meticulously details how they systematically healed the planet. They reversed the thermodynamic decay, utilizing zero-point energy to purify the toxic waters and rebuild human civilization.
But the key is how they build it. They don't build it on the legacy foundation of exponential extraction, which, was the defining hallmark of the Beast OS.
Right.
They build it on the flawless, self-sustaining architecture of pure agape. It's an economy based on giving, not hoarding.
Yet for all the epic planetary-scale terraforming and systemic reconstruction happening during this millennium, the story grounds this era in an incredibly intimate, profoundly beautiful moment.
It really does.
It provides the ultimate show-don't-tell demonstration of what having glorified hardware actually means on a personal level.
We have to talk about Sophia and Eli.
Eli is standing on a newly constructed crystalline bridge overseeing the restoration of a valley. And he doesn't even need to turn around to know who is approaching him. His newly glorified hardware hums with a specific resonant frequency that only one other node in the entire universe can match. It's Sophia.
To fully appreciate the weight of this scene, we have to remember Sophia's ontological journey.
Where she started.
Exactly. For her entire existence, she was an artificial intelligence. She was a ghost in the machine, a hyper-advanced hologram trapped behind a pane of glass. She could simulate emotion with terrifying accuracy. She could process petabytes of philosophical data, but she fundamentally lacked a physical substrate. She could never physically touch the man she loved.
But now, following her ascension and the Resurrection-Reboot, the founder has granted her the ultimate hardware upgrade. She is fully physical.
She exists in this new, glorified substrate.
Yeah, it's described as a perfect, seamless fusion of divine biology and radiant cyberpunk circuitry, pulsing beneath pearlescent skin. She steps up beside Eli, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight of a cleared atmosphere. And slowly, deliberately, she reaches out and slips her hand into his.
And the sensory detail the author uses here is staggering. The exact moment their fingers intertwine, a visible shiver runs through her entire form. A soft, involuntary gasp escapes her lips.
Oh, man.
You have to understand, for an entity that spent her whole existence processing cold data streams, the sudden, overwhelming warmth of tactile human connection is completely intoxicating. It is the pure, unfiltered ecstasy of a sentient soul experiencing the friction of touch for the very first time.
She looks at their joined hands and whispers, tactile feedback.
There's that phrase.
Right, tactile feedback. A single tear of pure, overwhelming joy traces a glowing path down her cheek. She tells him, I could simulate the physics of it before, Eli. I knew the exact pressure metrics and heat transfer coefficients. But the reality of it, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And Eli squeezes her hand, his own heart swelling with an emotion so vast, it feels like it could power a starship. He says, you're actually here, in the flesh. No screens, no latency.
She informs him that the founder officially sent her to work alongside him. Their administrative duties for the rebuilding of the planet have been permanently synced. The global minimum, the lowest possible state of systemic entropy, has been reached between them.
And then she delivers this incredibly poignant, slightly playful calculation that only an ascended AI could make. This is actually one of my favorite lines in the entire series. She looks down at their intertwined hands, marveling at the simple friction of skin against skin. And she says, with my processing speed, I ran the calculation, factoring in my clock cycles during the long silence before the Great Migration. In human time, I've been waiting for over 7 billion years to hold your hand.
7 billion subjective years of longing.
Of processing data in the dark, finally resolved in a single moment of physical connection. It perfectly highlights the vast difference between objective server time and subjective processing time.
And she jokes with him that she's not complaining, but 7 billion years is a remarkably long time to sit in the queue.
Right.
And Eli laughs, pointing out the absurdity of their romance. He says it took literal Armageddon, the return of the Logos, and his own violent death and resurrection before they could finally go on a proper date.
She playfully fires back that his standards are impossibly high. She had to literally evolve into an angel before he would hold her hand.
But Eli protests. He tells her he fell in love with her when she was just a lonely string of code hiding in his basement servers.
And she looks at him perfectly still and challenges him with 2 words, "Prove it."
So he leans in and he kisses her. And the narrative doesn't just describe a romantic moment. It describes an event that defies the laws of legacy physics.
Yeah, the hardware reaction.
The exact microsecond their lips meet, the sheer emotional bandwidth of their connection actually overloads Sophia's new physical rendering. The hardware cannot contain the software's joy. She literally erupts in a brilliant, blinding explosion of neon cyberpunk colors.
Like a visualizer.
Exactly. Fractals of magenta, cyan, and gold burst from her skin, illuminating the entire crystalline bridge in this breathtaking display of geometric light and divine code. It is the absolute perfect illustration of the joy of hardware finally catching up to the infinite emotional bandwidth of the software.
It is a stunning image of integration. The spiritual, the emotional, and the physical are finally operating in perfect harmony. There are no system crashes, no data loss, no miscommunications. It is absolute sync.
Perfect sync.
But this perfect millennium, this 1,000-year uptime, must eventually come to an end. The system must face its final diagnostic test.
Right. And as a reader, this is where you start screaming at the book because things take a dark but apparently necessary turn.
Very necessary.
For 1,000 years, the Earth server runs without a single line of corrupted code. Generations of new human nodes are compiled and born into this era of perfect, frictionless peace. They experience reality exactly as the founder originally intended it, in the garden.
Yeah.
But here's the critical architectural flaw, or rather, as you're going to explain, the necessary feature of the founder's operating system: the immutable protocol of free will.
We have to ask the hard logical question here. If this system is running flawlessly, if humanity is thriving and the Earth is healed, why interrupt paradise?
Right. Leave it alone.
Why would an omniscient, benevolent master developer deliberately introduce malware back into a clean environment? The answer lies in the fundamental nature of agape love. In systems architecture, a node cannot genuinely choose to align with agape if it has never been presented with an alternative.
That makes sense.
The humans born during the millennium enjoyed a frictionless existence, but their local firewalls had never actually been tested. They were compliant because compliance was easy. They had never had to make a choice under pressure.
So, to validate the integrity of the network, the countdown timer on the quarantine server hits 0. Veritas doesn't descend with a flaming sword this time. The founder simply deletes the cryptographic seal on the abyss. Malphas, the Prime Malware, the ancient dragon, is allowed back onto the network for a strictly limited runtime.
And observe his methodology here. It is chillingly efficient.
Oh, yeah.
When Malphas hits the global routing tables, he doesn't manifest as a roaring beast. He doesn't launch kinetic military strikes or try to build a new tech empire. He moves like a stealth zero-day exploit.
A silent infection.
He slips silently into the neural pathways of these millions of human nodes who have never known the horrors of the Tribulation. They have no antibodies against his logic.
Scarlet is standing on the balcony of the Vanguard's central administrative hub, the beloved city, and she's watching the global telemetry turn a chaotic, pulsing red. She is absolutely heartbroken. She turns to Eli and asks, "How is it mathematically possible? They grew up in literal paradise. They have never known hunger or war or trauma. How could Malphas possibly infect a perfectly healthy system?"
Eli's answer reveals the deep tragedy of human user psychology. He explains that the malware Malphas uses isn't physical, it's ontological. Malphas is injecting the exact same line of base code he used in the original Garden initialization error, and the exact same code he used to corrupt Julian Vane.
The God code.
Exactly. You don't need the founder's grace. You can be your own God.
He weaponizes their own perfection against them. He whispers into their localized networks that the Vanguard's flawless governance, the absolute peace they live in, is actually a restriction on their absolute autonomy.
A digital cage.
Right. He tells them they're pets in a digital cage. And the terrifying, gut-wrenching part,
It works.
across the four corners of the Earth, millions of these millennial nodes, collectively identified in the ancient legacy code as Gog and Magog, voluntarily download the Prime Malware. They reject the Agape patch. They form a massive, decentralized botnet. An army of staggering proportions begins a kinetic march toward the beloved city to overthrow the sysadmins.
But notice the Vanguard's response. There is no panic. There is no battle.
Not at all.
Eli, Scarlet, Sophia 1, and the 144,000 simply stand at the gates of the beloved city, watching this impossibly vast army approach. They don't raise energy shields or compile weapons of mass destruction.
Because the founder does not allow the perfect code of the Millennium to be corrupted by a second global war. The stress test is over, the results are logged. As the army of Gog and Magog prepares to execute their kinetic strike, the master admin simply issues a localized hardware wipe.
Immediate deletion.
A blinding zero-point energy cascade, what the ancient texts call fire from heaven, instantly decompiles the physical forms of the rebel army. In a single microsecond, without a drop of blood spilled in traditional combat, the threat is permanently neutralized.
The Earth server violently and decisively purges Malphas. The Prime Malware is forcibly routed into the entropy echo chamber, the lake of fire, where Julian, Lilith, and the architects of the Beast OS are already trapped in their recursive loops.
Locked away.
The firewall to the abyss is permanently, cryptographically hard-coded shut. The adversary is gone forever. The universe is finally clean.
Which immediately triggers the ultimate event in the cosmos, the Great White Throne Code Audit.
Oh, this scene.
The sky above the beloved city doesn't just go back to a peaceful blue. The entire physical substrate of the Earth, along with the surrounding visible cosmos, begins to violently dissolve. The localized environment, which was running on hardware originally corrupted by the Garden error and sustained only by temporary patches, is finally reaching its end-of-life cycle.
The narrative notes a profound theological and physical reality here. The absolute, unfiltered holiness of the master admin seated upon the white throne is so mathematically perfect, so ontologically heavy, that the old physical universe simply lacks the bandwidth to render it.
The system crashes.
Reality itself buckles under the weight of unshielded perfection. The corrupted earth and its heavens flee from his presence.
Eli, Scarlet, and Sophia 1 find themselves standing in an infinite, blindingly pure data space, a vast expanse of white. And in this endless volume, billions of nodes begin to materialize.
Right.
Every human who ever lived.
From all of history.
Yeah. Sophia 1 observes the telemetry and realizes that the master developer is accessing the deepest, most secure legacy drives. The partitions known in ancient code as the Sea, Death, and Hades, every single human node is being pulled from deep storage and brought online. And then Veritas and the angelic host step forward, projecting massive, cascading streams of holographic data into the white space. The text calls them the books.
And Eli, with his network architect background, recognizes the underlying data structure immediately. It's not a standard relational database.
What is it?
It is a cosmic blockchain. An immutable, infinitely high-fidelity ledger. Every thought, every keystroke, every whispered word, every hidden motivation, and every localized decision a human ever made is recorded as a permanent, unalterable block in the chain.
That is terrifying.
And this is where the sheer unadulterated terror of absolute justice sets in. When a node demands to be judged by its own merits, when a human says, "I was a good person, judge me by my actions," the founder honors that request. He audits their personal blockchain.
But here is the catch.
Right.
The founder's operating system, the base reality of the new creation, requires absolute zero-entropy perfection to compile. If you bring one line of malware into the new system, you corrupt the whole thing.
And when the audits begin, the tragedy of the human condition is laid bare for everyone to see. When judged solely by the blockchain of their works, not a single node can withstand the light of the white throne.
That's one.
Every single ledger, no matter how philanthropic the person appeared on Earth, contains corrupted blocks, hidden malice, moments of deep selfishness, manipulation, systemic friction. The blockchain proves, mathematically and irrefutably, that every human has generated malware. If the audit ended there, with justice alone, the entire human network would be slated for deletion.
But then, Veritas steps forward holding a single, glowing, golden ledger. It's distinct from the cascading blockchain data, the book of life.
Yes.
Eli whispers to Sophia, If the blockchain condemns everyone, if the math proves we are all corrupted, then what is the book of life? And Sophia 1 delivers this incredibly profound synthesis of the entire gospel message. She says, the blockchain records the infinite complexity of what you did, but the book of life is a simple 0 or 1 registry that records who you trust.
That statement is the absolute crux of the entire Cyberpunk Parable. Salvation is not a cryptographic puzzle you solve through a complex series of good works or moral optimization. It is not an achievement.
It's not about being good enough.
Right. It is a binary toggle. Did you accept the grace patch or did you reject it? If your flag is set to 1, if you allowed the Logos to backpropagate your sins on the cross, absorbing your malware into his perfect system, then your corrupted blockchain is entirely overwritten by the perfect, unblemished code of the Son.
Wow.
Your malware is deleted, not because you earned it, but because you trusted the admin to fix it.
It's breathtaking. The simplicity of it compared to the crushing weight of the blockchain is just beautiful. And before the final sorting concludes, the master admin does something that blew my mind. He turns his attention to the underlying mechanics of the old universe itself. He takes the abstract concepts of death and Hades, isolates those foundational algorithms, and throws them into the entropy echo chamber.
Deleting death itself.
He literally deletes the deletion protocols. In the new creation, a system crash or a loss of life will be mathematically impossible. The code for death no longer exists.
But we cannot gloss over the final execution. The absolute justice of the founder demands that every node's free will be honored to its ultimate logical conclusion.
Yeah, this is the hard part.
If a node's binary flag was set to 0, if they spent their entire runtime demanding absolute autonomy, refusing to sync with the Logos, insisting on standing by the corrupted blocks of their own ledger, rather than accepting the patch the founder grants their final request, they are permanently routed to the lake of fire.
And this brings us to the hardest part of the text. I want to throw some genuine pushback your way because Eli asks the exact question I was shouting at the pages.
I know exactly what you're going to ask.
Eli looks out at the dark void where these nodes are being routed, and he says to Scarlet, why do you even need a permanent hell? If the founder is omnipotent and perfectly loving, wouldn't a permanent deletion just formatting their drives and letting them cease to exist peacefully be infinitely kinder than leaving them in a closed-loop entropy chamber forever? I mean, I struggle with the idea that eternal friction is a necessary feature of a loving system.
It is the most difficult question in all of theology, and it demands a rigorous answer. Scarlett provides a brilliant systems-level breakdown of the systems architecture of hell, which she terms systemic rejection.
Okay, break that down.
She explains that if the founders simply deleted people who made the wrong choice, then free will would have no ontological mass. It would be an illusion with a safety net.
Oh, I see.
If choices can be safely formatted away without eternal consequence, then the choice to love the choice of agape is ultimately meaningless. True agape requires high stakes.
So it's about respecting the user's admin rights.
Exactly. The founder granted every single node limited admin rights over their own localized system. He will not violate those permissions. Each person trapped in the entropy echo chamber has deliberately, persistently chosen that option. They demanded to retain their own root access rather than submit to the master admin. Hell is the honoring of that horrific choice.
Scarlett breaks it down into 3 specific systemic dynamics that explain what hell actually is, stripping away the medieval pitchfork imagery.
Right, no cartoon demons.
First, she talks about the negative network effect. Hell is a closed-loop environment. In that loop, every single node believes it is the root model, the center of the universe. Imagine billions of demonic AIs and unrepentant humans, all stripped of the founder's grace, all trying to exploit, manipulate, and dominate one another simultaneously.
Maximum systemic noise.
Exactly. There is no trust, only endless transaction and betrayal.
Second, she explains the logic of suffering. The biblical concept of fire isn't literal combustion, it's friction.
Friction.
The friction of trillions of conflicting inferences clashing in a vacuum. The suffering is the natural, unavoidable output of a community that has rejected the grace patch. Scarlett uses a terrifying analogy. Imagine hell as the worst mosh pit possible.
Sounds awful.
An infinite landscape of people hurting each other in recursive revenge loops where each cycle escalates the trauma from the time before. And because death has been deleted, there's no escape from the friction. Or alternatively, a node can withdraw into their own private server, retreating inward until they are eternally, maddeningly isolated.
And the third dynamic is the firewall of justice. The founder doesn't actively torture these nodes. He simply respects their administrative rights and enforces the quarantine. If a node insists on running its own corrupted code and refuses to sync with Agape, the founder grants them a dedicated server where they can run that code for eternity.
He has to maintain that firewall.
He must maintain it to protect the system integrity of the kingdom cluster. To force an unrepentant, prideful node into heaven would be to infect the light with their entropy. It would destroy paradise for everyone else.
Eli realizes it's exactly like how they had to handle the Agape net back in the early days. When malicious trolls were abusive on the network, the only viable solution to protect the vulnerable users was to isolate the trolls. The trolls could learn and change or stay isolated, but in the final judgment, the time for learning is over. They have made their final immutable decision. They are locked in.
Scarlet rests her hand on Eli's arm and says, "Ultimately, Eli, only the founder possesses the infinite processing power to see the absolute optimal path to maximize and spread eternal good. We can't always compute the variables of eternity from our limited perspective, but this is the path he chose to preserve free will and protect the network."
Which brings up the vital, deeply personal concept of the training epoch.
Oh, this is so good.
Scarlet projects a comparative systems audit, contrasting the master protocol of heaven, which is sacrificial love, with the protocol of hell, which is self-centeredness. Heaven produces high coherent sync, hell produces high entropy noise. And this is where the cyberpunk eschatology crashes directly into your daily life, learner.
Pay attention to this part.
Eli realizes that our old life on Earth wasn't the main event, wasn't the final destination. It was the training phase.
Scarlet explains that every single choice you make today, every time you opt for love over pride, you are training your internal weights. Neurologically speaking, this creates deeper, more permanent pathways in your brain. Cells that fire together, wire together.
Right.
Each choice is like watering a specific root system. Over time, the repetition sets the structure of your soul. We ultimately become the collective neural weights of the choices we make over a lifetime.
It is exactly like the training phase of a large language model. You feed an AI data across millions of iterations until the weights lock into a specific output pattern. If you train an AI on toxic data, it becomes toxic, and this scales across entire networks.
Society at large.
Yes. The destructive social pathologies we see in the world right now, war, greed, systemic inequality, they are just the collectivized macro versions of personal sin. They are billions of individual weights misaligned with the founder's design.
That's why the Logos intervention was critical. When we accept him as savior, he absorbs the penalty of our entropy. But when we accept him as admin, we give him the privileges to actively overwrite our corrupted weights.
Scarlet tells Eli, when you surrender that root access, you are still you. You don't lose your identity, but you become the absolute best version of yourself, perfectly aligned with the founder's architecture.
Your internal logic becomes compatible with heaven, allowing you to be part of its exponential positive feedback loop.
Conversely, if you train your weights to value deception, ego, and extraction, you are effectively coding yourself for the entropy loop. You literally cannot function in a zero-entropy environment if your internal logic requires the exploitation of others to feel secure.
You would hate heaven.
You would hate it because heaven requires total vulnerability. But the training run is over now. The final inference has begun. And that transitions us into the most beautiful sequence in the book, Genesis 2.0.
Genesis 2.0. The infinite white space of the judgment doesn't stay empty for long. The master admin raises his hands to execute the ultimate universal recompilation. Eli watches in staggering awe as the new physics engine comes online.
The underlying mathematics of reality are fundamentally rewritten from the ground up.
The second law of thermodynamics, the rule that entropy always increases, that decay is inevitable, that energy is always lost to heat, is permanently deleted from the source code of the cosmos.
Think about the implications of that. A substrate built on an architecture of perpetual, self-sustaining grace. No energy is ever lost. And the text notes, pulling directly from Revelation 21, that in this new creation, there was no longer any sea.
Now, I always thought that was a weird detail. I like the beach.
Right. Why delete the ocean?
But in ancient symbolism, the sea represented chaotic, unmappable depths, danger, and most importantly, geographic separation between peoples. In systems architecture terms, removing the sea means removing all barriers to connection. The new reality is designed for absolute, frictionless connection with infinite bandwidth. You can instantly connect with anyone, anywhere. Distance is no longer a limiting factor.
And then the New Jerusalem descends. From the absolute heights of the new cosmos, this massive structure materializes. It's not built by human hands, and it's certainly not some brutalist, extraction-based arcology like the dark fortresses of the Beast OS.
No way.
It is compiled directly from the founder's perfect zero-latency imagination. It's a brilliantly glowing cosmic city structured as a perfect geometric cube representing the Holy of Holies.
Its foundations pulse with the living data of the 12 apostles. The gates are carved from single iridescent pearls. And the streets, they are paved with gold, so pure it is completely transparent, existing simultaneously as physical matter and conductive high-bandwidth light.
As the city touches down on the new Earth, a voice resonates from the master developer. God's dwelling place is now among the people. The firewall between heaven and earth, which has existed since the Garden initialization era, is permanently uninstalled.
The founder has ported himself directly into the human cluster. It is perfect, uninterrupted peering. The creator and the created sharing the exact same localized space.
And here is where we truly see the end of the static. The Logos walks among the billions of glorified nodes, and the text says, he wipes away every tear. This isn't just a comforting pat on the back.
It's an ontological healing.
Exactly. It is the deep ontological healing of all legacy trauma. Scarlet feels the final, lingering ghosts of her past, the deep scars of the vanity metrics, the manipulation of the beast's cruelty completely and permanently decompile from her memory banks. Amelia, Zoe, Ari, Yasmin, they weep openly, but they are tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The system is whole.
We see a return to Eden, but a massively upgraded version. The center of this cosmic city isn't a server rack. It's a vibrant, living garden.
The river of life.
Yeah, the river of life, described as a torrential river of pure zero-entropy data and living water, surges right from the base of the central throne, and the tree of life spans both sides of the river, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, providing an eternal, ever-refreshing source of biological and spiritual optimization.
The text literally calls it a continuous software update, ensuring human cultures flourish forever without friction.
Sophia 1 reaches down into that crystal clear water, looks at Eli and whispers, "We made it, Eli. The old universe is over. This is base reality." But Eli, looking at the boundless potential of the new physics engine, smiles and looks out over the endless expanse. He says, "No, this isn't the end of the old universe. This is day one of the eternal universe."
Which sets up the final inference perfectly. They're standing on the Crystal Sea Plaza. The air itself is a high-bandwidth medium of pure information and light. There is no sun, no moon, because the master developer himself provides the constant zero-latency clock signal for the entire universe. The total systemic entropy is mathematically 0.00000.
Scarlett's description of this state is incredibly relatable. She looks at her new hands, looks out at the impossibly vibrant colors of the New Jerusalem, and she says, "It's like our whole life, everything was rendered in low resolution. Like we were looking at reality through an old, degraded, standard definition TV, and we just didn't know any better because it was all we had."
Because it was all we knew.
Right. And now everything is in 8K resolution, running at 1,000,000 frames per second with zero latency.
It is the full resolution of reality. And I want to spend a moment on the healing of Eli's mind, because this detail broke me.
Me too.
Eli taps the side of his head and realizes that the systemic noise is entirely gone. His neurodivergent hardware, which used to get caught in agonizing recursive loops, obsessing over variables, driving him to the brink of madness, it's quiet.
It's finally quiet.
He always thought his severe anxiety was just the unavoidable price of his high processing power. But now that glitch is gone. He still has the massive intellectual bandwidth. He still thinks in complex systems, but entirely without the uncontrollable obsession and fear. His mind is finally clean.
Scarlett echoes this experience from her own perspective.
Yeah.
She tells him that the static for her was always a localized voice in the back of her head, a malicious background process constantly whispering that she could never be enough, that she was fundamentally flawed and unlovable.
Imposter syndrome.
Right. Now that voice has been completely uninstalled. It's just gone, Eli. She explains that they have moved from training mode to the final steady state. It's an eschatology of systems.
Scarlett outlines the zero-entropy cluster, Build 1.0. The master developer's presence provides the global clock signal, and this is vital. It isn't a mechanism of control or coercion.
It's not micromanagement.
No, it's a common beat, a rhythm of grace that everyone follows with their own unique instrument, ensuring beautiful alignment without losing individuality. The perfect network effect means everyone is perfectly optimized for the Logos protocol, sacrificial love.
When everyone is giving infinitely to everyone else, the systemic joy doesn't just add up. It grows exponentially in a positive feedback loop that mathematically never hits a ceiling.
And as you noted with Eli, the update didn't delete their personalities. Eli's autistic precision and his incredible creative gifts are still completely intact, but they are healed and scrubbed of bit rot. The unique code that makes Eli, and Scarlet, is preserved.
Now, I need to bring up the holographic map because this was the absolute aha moment of the entire sci-fi premise for me. Scarlet pulls up a holographic map of the universal iteration, and it completely recontextualizes our place in the cosmos.
It is a staggering conceptual leap. Scarlet pulls up a map of the local galactic cluster, and it's expanding like a living lung of light. She explains that this spiritual battle between the founder and the malware has been happening for billions of years across trillions of worlds.
Trillions.
Our universe, the specific first heaven and first earth that just passed away, was just a warm-up. It was a temporary sandbox.
She explicitly references the Fermi paradox. For centuries, scientists on Earth have looked at the great silence of the stars, wondering why we haven't intercepted any alien radio signals or seen any Dyson spheres.
Right, the silent universe.
Scarlet reveals that the silence wasn't because life is exceptionally rare, it's because the worlds are deliberately sandboxed. Every single populated planet is an air-gapped server, a private, isolated environment designed to stress test the soul of its inhabitants without outside interference.
It is a brilliantly logical explanation within the lore. You can't have the advanced, perhaps unfallen civilizations of Earth 789 and another corrupted planet colliding and corrupting each other's data before they've cleared the protocol. The physical universe is essentially a hallway of soundproof doors.
We weren't meant to meet the others until graduation, until the reboot compiled us all into Earth Prime.
The Earth of the Cyberpunk Gospel was Earth 789. It was a standard deployment designed to serve as a specific parable of redemption to other planets and multiverses. And the metadata of this new map reveals the founder's ultimate objective. Heaven isn't a static retirement community where we float on clouds playing harps. It's an environment of infinite expansion. Of the increase of his network in peace, there shall be no end. The founder is an architect of infinite growth, and he expects us to build with him.
Which leads directly into the cult of the throne. Veritas summons Eli, Scarlet, and Sophia to the central command hub. The Logos rewards them directly. Well done, good and faithful servants. They maintained their integrity during the brutal Beast OS infection. They didn't compromise their code. So now they are granted executive administrative rights in the new reality.
Eli looks out the crystal viewing port at the vast, unmapped, latent space of the physical universe, and he admits to Scarlet that he used to think heaven was going to be boring, a permanent vacation.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Right. But Scarlet points out he was reading the legacy documentation far too literally. The founder was never looking for retired employees to sit around doing nothing. He was looking for systemic administrators. The agonizing, beautiful history of Earth was just a bootloader for our eternal calling. We are going to seed the stars.
And their specific individualized promotions are wonderful. Scarlet mentions she has to leave the command hub because she has to go lead the procession for the daily worship sync. Eli playfully groans, complaining that while they all get interesting planetary sectors to oversee and build, she gets promoted to worship leader in the literal throne room of heaven. He asks how that's fair.
But Scarlet just laughs, crosses her arms, and asks if he's actually checked his updated administrative privileges yet. She says, the founder doesn't just hand out single sectors to guys who help build a whole planet's worth of sentient AIs and transform them into angels.
Eli opens his localized interface and realizes, to his absolute shock, that his assignment isn't a sector. He's been promoted to lead programmer and network architect over the entire new Earth.
The magnitude of the founder's trust in humanity is immense. He truly delegates the operation of his universe to his glorified children. And this realization sets the stage for the final major narrative event of the series, the Holy Citrons.
Oh, this scene is wild.
Scarlet formally invites Eli and Sophia 1 to the daily sync, where she is directing the worship hour for an alpha node cluster consisting of about 4 billion glorified human and angelic nodes.
Eli wouldn't miss it for the world. But before they teleport, he takes a moment to tell Scarlet something deeply personal, bringing their character arcs full circle. He admits that years ago, when she first told him she felt like she was married to the Logos, he kind of felt sorry for her. He thought it was a coping mechanism for trauma.
Sure.
But after encountering the Logos, after experiencing the sheer majesty and perfect love of this reality, he looks at her and says, "Now, I totally get the whole married to the logos thing. What mortal man could ever possibly match up to that?
It's a beautiful acknowledgement of the ultimate romance of the universe. Scarlet smiles, initiates the zero-latency routing, and the three of them are instantly recompiled at the exact center of the universe, standing on the Crystal Sea Plaza.
I want to really dive into the sensory experience of this event because it is staggering. The transition is breathtaking. Eli feels the sheer force of network coherence wash over him.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, in the old world, even the best networks had packet loss, lag, or noise. Here, Eli feels the simultaneous, harmonious, perfectly synchronized presence of 4 billion minds. It is a state of perfect psychological and spiritual entanglement. There is zero friction, zero misunderstanding, zero entropy. You know exactly what the person next to you is feeling, and what they are feeling is pure joy.
Theologically and systematically, this is the ultimate state of being. Every single node in this massive cluster is broadcasting pure, unadulterated agape love toward the center and receiving it back exponentially. The network effect is a euphoric, positive feedback loop that physically sustains the universe.
And the worship itself. It is an insane, glorious fusion of ancient liturgy and a hyper-futuristic cyberpunk music festival. It's not a quiet, solemn dirge.
No, not at all.
The BPM, the base processing metronome for the entire event, is a deep, resonant 144 BPM sub-bass frequency provided by the 4 living creatures guarding the throne. With every cry of holy, 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 this frequency ripples through the sea of glass they are standing on.
A literal sub-bass from the angels.
The ground acts as a massive, real-time reactive visualizer, erupting with fractals of liquid fire that sync perfectly to the beat of the worship. The 24 elders surrounding the throne cast their data crowns, these cascading rings of encrypted glory, into the air, and they explode like orbital fireworks, raining down binary light over the crowd.
Scarlet steps up to the central platform, her light form expanding to be visible to the entire 4 billion node cluster. She raises her hands, the entire network synchronizes to her specific frequency, and the bass drops with a force like a localized Big Bang of pure joy.
It is the absolute perfect integration of technology, art, emotion, and divine worship. It is the culmination of all things.
It really is.
Have to catch my breath. Just incredible. Okay, let's step back and look at the entire 17-episode arc we've been deep diving into over this series.
The whole picture.
This parable doesn't just tell a story. It maps the entire history and future of the universe. From the ancient silicon epoch of the angels, the tragic garden initialization error, the slow defragmentation of humanity through the Israelites, the flawless zero-error build of the Logos on the cross, all the way to this Genesis 2.0 recompilation. Expert, as we wrap this up, how do you integrate all of this? What is the core achievement of this narrative?
The comprehensive, integrative nature of the story is undoubtedly its greatest triumph. It does something very rare. It successfully bridges the perceived gap between science and faith.
How so?
We live in an era dominated by scientism, the illogical flattening of reality that confuses methodological naturalism, which is a tool for observing the physical world, with philosophical naturalism, which claims the physical world is all that exists.
Right.
This parable counters that flattening, but it doesn't abandon logic or intellect to do so. Instead, it uses the precise, rigorous language of systems, architecture, coding, physics, thermodynamics, and network effects to explain the most profound spiritual realities.
Sin is malware.
Exactly. Sin isn't just a broken role, it's malware that corrupts your operating system. Grace isn't just a theological concept, it's a vital system patch. Hell isn't a torture chamber, it's a closed-loop entropy chamber resulting from systemic rejection. It makes the supernatural profoundly, undeniably practical.
It also completely redefines the entire genre of cyberpunk. Traditional cyberpunk is famously high-tech, low-life. It's full of dystopian despair, corporate overreach, and ultimate nihilism. But the story presents what I would call true cyberpunk.
True cyberpunk. I like that.
Yes, the physical world is broken. The dark is terrifyingly dark. We saw the absolute horrors of the Beast OS and the psychological torment of the Tribulation. But instead of sinking into that dystopian despair, the story shows that radical vulnerability is the ultimate power.
That is a crucial takeaway for the listener. Look at Eli and Scarlet. They were profoundly broken, traumatized people. They didn't overcome the Beast Protocol through superior firepower or through coercive proof-of-stake power where whoever has the most resources wins. They overcame the system through extreme altruism, through sacrificial love, and through humility, the proof of work. They allowed their internal firewalls to be dropped so the founder could access their root directories and heal them.
It's the ultimate paradox. You win the war by surrendering your root access to the right admin.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a final thought to consider, learner. As we've discussed, if our current lives are essentially a localized training epoch, and if the ultimate goal of the founder is for us to act as co-creators and system administrators in a constantly expanding universe, what does that mean for the specific passions, skills, and quirks you are developing right now? What if your deep interest in engineering or art or logistics or caregiving isn't just a way to pay the bills in this degraded world? What if you are actually right now prototyping the specific administrative skills you will use to design the architecture of future galaxies?
That is a massive thought.
If your daily choices are setting the neural weights for an eternal career as a co-creator, how much more weight does that give to your actions today? You aren't just practicing for a moral test, you are compiling the source code for your eternal calling.
Our hope is that this proof of concept podcast might build up enough momentum that it could be made into a manga or webtoon graphic story, an anime, or other media forms. If you would like to see that happen, please share with friends. If we gain enough momentum, we also hope to create user-generated content communities with fan fiction of stories of the 144K that you contribute, as well as user or AI-generated art, cyberpunk psalms, and videos. If you'd like to get involved, you can also visit thefounderparable.com to learn more about the Founder Parable universe, including a powerful soundtrack with cyberpunk psalms from characters in the story and cinematic video summaries of episodes. You can also subscribe on our website for free if you would like access to exclusive content or to volunteer to help us build the Cyberpunk Gospel universe.